My name is Emily Soni. I grew up in a small town outside of Seattle, where every conversation at the dinner table revolved around my brother, Daniel. He was the golden child, straight A's, captain of the soccer team, business school scholarship. Me? I was creative. That's what my mom would say when relatives asked what I was doing with my life. Emily's creative. She'd smile, that tight smile people use when they're trying not to look embarrassed. I wasn't a failure. I just didn't fit into their version of success. I studied film and media, worked freelance jobs, scraped by on editing gigs. I loved it, even if the checks barely covered rent. My parents thought I was wasting time. One evening, I remember it so clearly, the rain was pounding on the kitchen window. My mom was stirring soup, my dad reading something on his tablet. Daniel had just gotten promoted at his finance firm, and the whole dinner was basically a celebration of him. Then my mom looked at me, casually, and said, "You should really think about something stable, Em. You'll never own a house like your brother." She said it like it was a fact, like it had already been decided for me. I laughed it off in the moment. I didn't want to cry in front of them. But later that night, I sat in my car outside their house for almost an hour. The rain on the windshield looked like static on an old TV. My hands were gripping the steering wheel, and I just whispered to myself, "One day." It wasn't anger at first. It was more like a quiet burn, like an ember that didn't go out. Years went by. Daniel got married, bought a huge house on Lake Washington. My parents helped with the down payment, of course. I was living in a small apartment above a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, editing videos for YouTubers and small brands. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. There were nights I'd see Daniel's posts on Instagram, the housewarming party, the new car, the family dinners I wasn't invited to. My parents always said they forgot to tell me. I'd scroll through those pictures and feel like I was looking at a world I wasn't allowed in. Still, I kept going. I worked longer hours, taught myself marketing, learned SEO, started taking on clients who needed help building their online presence. One gig turned into 3, then 10. I wasn't just editing anymore. I was managing entire brand campaigns. By the time I hit 29, I was running a small digital agency with 6 people, quietly. No big announcements, no bragging. I just worked. Then came Thanksgiving 2 years ago. My parents invited me last minute, like they always did, almost as an afterthought. I brought a bottle of wine, wore the nicest thing I owned. Daniel was there, of course, telling stories about his new vacation home in Palm Springs. At one point, my dad said, "You know, Em, if you'd just listened to your brother, maybe you'd have something to show for yourself by now." It hit harder than I expected. I could feel the sting behind my eyes, but I smiled, pretending I was fine. Daniel smirked, that lazy, pitying look he always gave me. "Don't worry, Em. Not everyone's built for the grind." That night I went home, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a new document titled Plan. I didn't know what the plan was yet, but I knew this. I was done being the afterthought. Over the next few weeks, I poured every ounce of energy into my business. I upgraded my website, hired a part-time accountant, started pitching bigger clients, real companies, not just influencers. I networked like my life depended on it. There were nights I fell asleep at my desk, coffee gone cold, face lit only by the blue light of my screen. And slowly things began to shift. One campaign went viral, then another. Clients started referring me to others. Suddenly, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, but I didn't tell anyone, especially not my family. When my parents called, I kept the conversations short. "Yeah, things are fine." When they asked if I was still doing those little videos, I said yes, just to keep them comfortable. Inside, I was building something bigger than they could imagine. And one night, about a year later, I got an email that changed everything. A luxury real estate brand wanted to sign a long-term marketing contract, 7 figures. Legitimate, verifiable, life-changing. I remember staring at the screen, hand over my mouth, whispering, "This can't be real." It was. The next morning, I walked to the window. The city skyline was gray and foggy, but it looked different. It looked like opportunity. That was the day I realized. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be quiet, deliberate, and undeniable. And it started with a house. It was early spring when the betrayal happened, though I didn't recognize it as that at first. I'd been too focused on work, too deep in late-night calls and endless edits to notice the shift in tone every time my family spoke to me. It started with a group chat, my parents, Daniel, his wife Clara, and me. The message read, "Mom, we have some exciting news. Daniel and Clara just put an offer on a new house." Dad, "Big one, Lakeview property. Maybe one day you can visit, Em." I stared at my phone for a minute, thumb hovering over the screen. Visit, like I was the distant cousin, not the daughter. When I finally replied with, "Congrats, that's amazing," I could almost feel their collective sigh of relief, like I had played my part properly. But a week later, I found out the truth. A friend of mine, Mia, worked in real estate. We were having coffee when she said, "You know your brother's house? It was listed under your parents' name first. They transferred it to him after purchase." I remember setting my cup down slowly, watching the foam ripple. "What do you mean they bought it?" "They paid most of it," she said, "about 70%. I only know because my firm handled the paperwork." I laughed, that weird, shaky laugh people do when they're trying not to break. "Wow, they never mentioned that." Mia gave me that soft look, pity mixed with discomfort. I hated it. That night, I called my mom. "Hey, I just heard something interesting." I started carefully. "Did you and Dad help Daniel with the house?" There was a pause, the kind that hums with tension. Then she sighed. "Well, yes, dear. We wanted to give him a good start. You know how hard things are for families." "I'm your family," I said quietly. "Oh, Em, you know what I mean," she replied. "Daniel has responsibilities, a wife, maybe kids soon. You're still figuring things out." The words hit like cold air, still figuring things out, as if everything I'd built meant nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my dark apartment, the city lights painting streaks across the walls. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I kept replaying her voice, the way she'd said it so effortlessly, like I was a phase she expected to end. Over the next few weeks, things spiraled. Daniel posted his new house all over social media, drone shots of the backyard, a marble kitchen island, captions like, "Work hard, play harder." I muted him, but every now and then, one of my parents would text me, "Mom, look at Daniel's place. So proud of him." "Dad, he's really doing well for himself. You could learn from him." It wasn't just ignorance anymore. It was cruelty, wrapped in politeness. One Sunday, they invited me over. "Family dinner," Mom said. When I arrived, Daniel opened the door. "Hey, Emmy," he said, that smug grin plastered on his face. "Glad you could make it. Don't get lost in all this space." Inside, everything looked like a magazine spread. Polished floors, glass staircase, designer furniture. My parents were sitting by the fireplace sipping wine, laughing. Mom looked at me and said, "Isn't it beautiful? You have to admit, your brother's done well." "I admit it," I said quietly. Daniel laughed. "Don't worry, Em, you'll get there. Maybe, one day." It was the maybe that broke something inside me. I left early that night, didn't say goodbye. The cold air outside felt cleaner than the air in that house. I drove back to my apartment with my hands shaking on the wheel. In my head, I kept hearing that sentence from years ago. "You'll never own a house like your brother." Not this time. Something inside me hardened. Not anger. Focus. Revenge wasn't about making them suffer. It was about making them see. I wanted to build something so undeniable they'd choke on their own words. For the next 6 months, I became a ghost. I stopped answering family calls, Every ounce of my energy went into my business. I expanded into new markets, started consulting for international clients, hired 2 more full-time employees. At night, I'd sit by my window with a notebook, sketching ideas, goals, milestones. I called it my quiet war. And then one evening, I got an unexpected email from a client I'd worked with briefly a year earlier. They were launching a major campaign for a global tech brand, and they wanted me to lead it. The budget was more than my agency had ever seen. I didn't celebrate. I just stared at the numbers, whispered, "This is it." Over the next few months, I worked like I was possessed. We delivered that campaign flawlessly. It went viral, won awards, and pulled in clients I'd only dreamed of working with. By the end of that year, I checked my account balance and saw a number that didn't feel real, $200,000 all earned, no inheritance, no help, just quiet, relentless work, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do next. The morning I decided to buy a house wasn't cinematic or grand. It was quiet, gray light spilling through my blinds, the hum of the city just starting to wake up. I made my coffee, sat down at my desk, and opened a tab I'd been avoiding for years. Real estate listings. I typed in Seattle waterfront homes. When the results loaded, I felt something shift in me. Rows of houses, all glittering with that same artificial promise I'd been told I could never touch. I didn't even want one, not at first. What I wanted was to look, to feel that I could. But then, as I scrolled, I saw it. A modern glass-front property on Lake Washington. 5 bedrooms, a dock, a view that looked like it had been painted. $5.2 million, listed just days ago. And the address? I froze. It was 2 blocks away from Daniel's house. I stared at the screen, heartbeat thudding in my ears. It felt like fate, like the universe was quietly handing me the perfect setup. I called the agent. "Hi, I'm interested in the Lakeview property," I said, trying to sound calm. She laughed lightly. "You and half the city. It's one of the most competitive listings we've had this month." "I'll pay cash," I said. There was a pause on the other end. "Cash?" "Yes, full amount, no contingencies." I could almost hear her posture straighten. "I can schedule a private showing this afternoon." When I walked into that house, everything inside me went still. It wasn't just the view, though it was stunning, glass walls opening onto a horizon of blue and light. It was the feeling of standing there, knowing I belonged. No parents whispering doubts, no brother smirking in the corner, just silence. I looked out over the water and whispered, "This is mine." I wired the money the next morning. No mortgage, no loans, just a simple transaction that would echo louder than any argument ever could. 2 weeks later, I moved in. The first night, I slept on an air mattress in the middle of that empty living room, surrounded by boxes and echoing quiet. I left the blinds open. The lights from Daniel's house glowed faintly down the road. I smiled, whispering to the dark, "Hey, big brother, guess who's your neighbor now?" But I didn't tell anyone, not yet. I wanted the reveal to land like a slow burn, deliberate, precise. So, for months, I kept it secret. I furnished the house, planted a small garden, hosted quiet dinners with friends who had no idea what it symbolized. Every time I drove past my parents' old neighborhood, I could almost hear my mother's voice. "You'll never own a house like your brother." It became a mantra, a reminder. Then, one Saturday afternoon in early summer, my phone buzzed. A text from my mom. "Mom, we're having dinner at Daniel's tonight. You should come. It's been too long." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Me. Sure, I'll bring dessert." When I arrived that night, the house was loud with laughter and clinking glasses. Daniel's wife greeted me at the door. "Emily, wow, look at you. Haven't seen you in months." "Yeah," I said with a smile. "Been busy." Dinner was the same routine. Daniel talking about his investments, my dad praising him for his discipline. I sat there, quiet, smiling when appropriate. Then, as everyone reached for seconds, I cleared my throat. "So, Funny story, I said. I bought a house. The table went quiet. Daniel smirked. Oh, yeah? Finally moving out of your apartment? No, I said, holding his gaze. It's actually on Lakeview Drive, 2 blocks from here. My mom blinked. Wait, Lakeview? My dad frowned. That's this neighborhood. Daniel's fork paused midair. Hold on, are you serious? I nodded, calm, almost serene. Closed on it last month, paid cash. The silence that followed was sharp, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Then my dad laughed, uneasy. Cash? You mean you took out a loan, right? No, I said softly. No loans, all mine. I watched it hit them one by one. Disbelief first, then realization, then something darker. Daniel's jaw tightened. My mom's smile faltered. How did you manage that? She whispered. I took a sip of my wine, eyes never leaving hers. Remember when you said I'd never own a house like Daniel? You were right, I didn't. I bought one better. The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I've ever heard. I didn't gloat. I didn't explain. I just stood, said, "Thanks for dinner," and walked out. The air outside was cool, the kind that smells like rain. I could see my house lights glowing faintly in the distance. Every step toward it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they'd tried to take. I didn't hear from my parents for a few days after that dinner. Not a text, not a call, just silence. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like the pause between thunder and rain. Then one afternoon my phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at her name for a moment before answering. Hi, Mom. Her voice was soft, careful. Emily, we stopped by your place. I blinked. You... What? She rushed to explain. We were just driving by Daniel's and saw the house. It's beautiful. I didn't realize. It was that one. I smiled faintly. Yeah, that one. There was a pause. Then, almost like she couldn't help herself, she said, I just didn't think you'd ever be capable. I finished for her. She exhaled. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, I said quietly. It's what you've always meant. She didn't argue. She just sighed again and said, Your father wants to see it sometime. You know how he is. Maybe someday, I said, when I'm ready. When the call ended, I stood there for a long time, staring out at the water. The sun was setting, casting gold streaks across the lake. It looked peaceful, almost unreal. I thought I'd feel victorious, triumphant. But what I felt instead was clarity. The revenge had already happened. It wasn't in the house, or the money, or even the stunned look on their faces that night. It was in the silence afterward, the kind of silence that comes when people finally realize they underestimated you. A week later, Daniel showed up unannounced. I saw him through the glass door, standing stiffly on the porch in his pressed shirt and perfect hair. For a second, I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Hey, I said, keeping my voice neutral. He looked around, eyes scanning the place, the view, the art on the walls, the calmness of it all. So it's true, he said quietly. You actually did it. I told you, I said, maybe one day. He gave a short, humorless laugh. You didn't have to make it a competition. I tilted my head. I didn't. You did. I just played along. He looked at me for a long time, not angry, not smug this time, just unsettled. They talk about you now, you know. Mom and Dad. They don't say it, but they're proud. I nodded. Funny how pride shows up after proof. He smiled faintly. Guess we both got what we wanted. Maybe, I said, meeting his eyes. But only one of us earned it. He left soon after. No hug, no apology, just that lingering silence between siblings who finally saw each other clearly. That night, I stood on my dock with a glass of wine, the air cool and damp. The lake was perfectly still. No wind, no ripples, just reflection. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to prove my worth to people who decided early on I didn't have any. About how many times I'd swallowed hurt, stayed polite, worked in the dark. And now, standing there with everything I'd built, I realized something simple. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers, "You were wrong about me." I didn't need their validation anymore. I had something better: peace. The next morning, I took a walk around the neighborhood. As I passed Daniel's house, I saw him through the window, holding his coffee, watching the same lake I was. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small next to him. I just smiled, turned away, and kept walking. Because the best revenge is living beautifully where they swore you never could. And I do, every single day. Soft piano fades, rain against glass, her voice calm but firm. "You'll never own a house like your brother," they said, and now I own one they can see from theirs. Beat. That's enough for me.